Savvy Business Radio, drawing out the best from our guests with our host, Christina Nitchman.
Our guest is Bernard Golden, PhD and clinical psychologist in practice for over 30 years and is the founder of Anger Management Education in Chicago. Today, Bernard shares tips and details on his latest book, Overcoming Destructive Anger. Visit Bernard's website at angermanagementeducation.com. Hi, Dr. Golden. Welcome to Savvy Business Radio and our Heartbeat of the World segment. How are you today?
Good. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You betcha. I was super excited to have you come chat with us. We're starting the new year, and last year we started on Savvy, our Heartbeat of the World segment, which really helps our audience deal with some of the current issues going on around the world. I know people can feel a loss of control and feeling like they can't really do things for a lot of stuff going on around them, but you are helping people with your practice with anger management, which is a really, really good thing for anyone who feels out of control in any part of their life, whether it be in politics, family, work, and you're going to help them deal with their anger and negative emotions. But before we go to all of that, share with our audience a little bit about your background. What brought you to the wonderful world of psychotherapy and anger management?
Sure. There are two different pathways to my career and one I focus on. When growing up, my mom had a lot of anxiety and my father had depression. And as a child, I guess I learned to or desired to, what can I do to help these people? Little knowing that in a way I was trying to get them to be more available and more present with me. But sometimes through the eyes of a child, that's what a child does. Is they take it on as their own role to help them feel an improved mood. The direct pathway to my focus on anger was similarly as a child. I had my own share of anger. Didn't have too much aggression, occasionally a little fight, but I realized that I was getting out of control. When I threw a shoe at my brother's head, he ducked. This is after he had pinned me down on the floor. I said, "Uncle," pretending I was calm. So when I got up, I threw that shoe at his head. He ducked. And it went through the window, but the window was closed, so it broke the glass. And we lived on the second floor in an apartment building. I was so fortunate that no one came through the doorway of the building that was right under our window.
Oh, no.
That was just one example of learning that I better rein in my anger. My parents, they had anger that was more like gnats. They would pick on each other. It was not like they were rageaholics, but it was another reason. Also, I taught elementary school in the South Bronx for 6 years, and I learned to deal with my anger as well as help the children with their anger. And then finally, I worked in psychiatric hospitals. I started putting together a 45-minute class on anger, anxiety, and depression. And so that's how I got here.
Wow. You know what I'm getting from you? When you started out, you said your mother was anxious and your dad was depressed. Are those the same coin as anger? Are they part of anger that's maybe not seep through or expressed? Are they just totally different emotions?
No, they're different emotions, but they're very related. For example, when people have an anxiety issue, they're more prone to feel threatened. And part of anger is when we feel threatened, whether it's a real or just a perceived threat. So anxiety can breed anger. Some people who are so uncomfortable with anger, they may actually become more anxious rather than angry. They may feel the feelings of anger arise and then they become anxious instead. People who are depressed many times are angry at themselves, or if they became depressed, they become more hopeless and pessimistic, and that also makes them more vulnerable to anger if you're thinking that things won't work out, if you have that mindset. So they're separate emotions, but they're very much related.
Wow. And where does it all stem from? All of these different negative emotions, where do they come about from? Is it the same place that positive emotions come from?
Well, our emotions are part of being human. As much as we try at times to run away from the bad ones and try to increase the good ones. That they're all messages about what we're experiencing. And the challenge is if we can pause and think about and reflect on what the message of our emotion is, we get better connected with ourselves. All too often, if we try to suppress or deny or minimize our own anger, we won't recognize that feeling, well, anger or other feelings. We won't recognize those feelings in other people because we've already tried to run from them.
Wow, this is interesting to me. I remember in my 20s, I was going through this meditative, trying to get quiet in my mind and get very not angry. And what it was, I grew up in a household that was physically abusive. My dad was, and also an alcoholic. So I was really full of rage. And so, but I didn't like the way my dad behaved. So I made a point in my early 20s that I was going to be peaceful. And that was my motto, what was going off in my head. I'm going to be peaceful. I'm going to be peaceful. So I decided I'm going to be peace everywhere I go. And it's funny, people started saying to me, wow, you're so peaceful. But inside, I was like a war raging. And you're right about that. You can't run away from them. You can try to deny it and say to yourself out loud or in your head, I'm peaceful. But really, it'll tear you up, whether you're putting out that kind of feeling of or that kind of signal of peacefulness. I was starting to have health issues by the time I got to 30, because really, if you try to hide the emotion, it's going to come out another way, isn't it?
Emotions demand attention. In a way, they're saying to us, I will not be ignored. So you're right. Either they come out indirectly, maybe angry at someone that you really weren't angry at to begin with. You may be more anxious about situations that before you weren't anxious about, or you may have physical symptoms that relate to the unexpressed emotions as well. Definitely.
Yeah, what I'm getting from you earlier that you just said is anger and all of these emotions aren't really positive or negative. They're signals from inside of you trying to get out and tell you something, give you a message. So is it really to look at all of your emotions and say, what is my body or my emotions trying to tell me right now?
It's really helpful to look at that our emotions, our feelings are part of being human. And, sometimes we look at other animals and we say, oh, but they don't have feelings. And we look down at them disparagingly. We criticize them for not having feelings. But so many of us spend so much time trying to deny or run away from our feelings. And yes, they're part of being human. Listen to them. Increasingly, if you can develop the ability to say, whatever feeling I'm having is just some reaction in my body, even though I'm feeling tense. That's all it is a passing tension in my body. And then start to listen to what's it trying to tell me. That's the real secret of being connected with yourself, knowing what you value, and then again, being more empathic with your own suffering, as well as makes you empathic with other people's suffering.
I like that you mentioned that. I have a friend who has told me for years that she doesn't like to be angry. And she has unlike my past childhood, her childhood was really great. I mean, she had great parents, no real anger issues in her home, but she really, really likes to be in a state of equilibrium, non-anger. And it's been hard for her to express anger in a healthy way. How does someone who is going through something like that begin to express and get a hold of how to express anger in a healthy way and actually get it out of themselves without holding it in? Sure.
Part of it is making peace with those feelings, recognizing that it's natural to be angry. So recognizing, for example, if you're saying, I got to be peaceful now. Well, what's the situation that's triggering that? What's the situation that is making her feel I have to kind of minimize this, calm myself, and recognize that the anger is a reaction, again, one, to feeling some kind of threat, and the anger is just a feeling. All too often we think of anger as aggression, which is the behavioral expression of the feeling. So people sometimes are afraid even to use the word, yet alone have the feeling, but it's just a feeling, and it doesn't mean you have to act on it. And I think people who can learn to pause and sit with the feeling, that's the beginning of making peace with it.
Yeah. And you had mentioned that when you start to get in touch with your feelings, and anger included, that you begin to be able to be more empathic, not only to yourself, but to other people's emotions. And I'm guessing when you do that, when someone acts out in anger, then outside of you, you're able to have more compassion. Is that true?
Right. If you can look at your own anger as some kind of a threat, some kind of a threat to your emotional safety, your physical safety, your financial security, that's safety, your safety of loved ones. Once you begin to look at your own pain or suffering behind your anger, then when other people are angry, you can more quickly recognize that behind their anger, some form of suffering, some form of fear, self-doubt, anxiety, whatever it might be.
Yeah. So sometimes anger can really be a cry from someone's soul for you to have compassion for them. And now thinking back to my dad, he was very angry, but he grew up in World War II in Germany with bombs dropping ahead. And now being older and he's now passed away, I can maybe begin to understand and have compassion for his anger in that it must have been hard for him going through that as a child. Is this when you begin to recognize, when you see people going through anger, it can be a cry for compassion, can't it?
Very much so. I make the comparison to an infant who's crying because he has digestive problems, or his diaper is filled, or he's feeling a draft against his face. He can't put it in words. And all too often, when people are quick to become angry, they're not putting into words or even recognizing the pain behind it. And I sometimes suggest that every moment that we're angry, I say is a distraction from feeling that raw sting of the pain behind the anger. And so very much. And it's helpful that you're able to be empathic with his suffering, at the same time be empathic with your own. One doesn't deny the other.
Yeah. And it's true because someone said to me, if you have something bad happen to you and then you say, okay, I understand it, or I'm forgiving it, it doesn't mean you've forgotten it, but it means that you're able to face your own emotions about it, face what's going on with them, but it allows you to both let go and move on in a healthy way.
You're allowed to see the bigger picture for each individual and to see that we're all human and have our weaknesses and flaws. And it also helps us feel less isolated. All too often people may feel anger or some other emotion and feel so isolated that they're the only ones experiencing some of that.
Yeah. How does anger work out in your body biologically? How does it affect your body, your brain? How does it work out?
Sure. One hormone that increases is cortisol, and that's considered the hormone responsible for your fight or flight or freeze response. And so your heartbeat increases, your blood goes to your extremities to either fight or take flight, and you may have more shallow breathing, which only makes your body more tense.
Wow.
And
you know what this...
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, when I have fear, which I don't know if it's completely related to that, but when I have fear, I sometimes get tunnel vision in that emotion. And so when I was in the situation learning to fly, sometimes my teacher would say, you get super tunnel vision. You only see like one instrument or one instruction he's given me because I'm so fearful. Does that happen in emotion? Does that happen in anger when your body's going through anger? Does it shut down other sensories while you're focused on the flight or fight?
Very much so. When we're fearful, often it makes us move away from whatever's going on. Anger sometimes pulls us toward it, but with that same tunnel vision. I refer in my book to what I call the Prairie Dog Syndrome. And you won't see it in any psychology manual or anything. But if you've ever pictured that little prairie dog on its hind legs, always ready for some kind of threat. And so if you're hyper alert for threat, that adds to that kind of tunnel vision. So if you're walking along, hiking in the woods with a friend, you might more readily see that branch on the ground as a snake, whereas your friend might just say, that's a branch.
Ah, that's true. And you can't see beyond that because you're so scared that you see what your mind is kind of putting out there, what you think you're seeing, but it's not actually what you're seeing.
It's like looking through the world with a filter. Exactly.
Wow. That's crazy. How do we begin? Now, I know your book mentioned mindfulness. How do we bring that in? Let's say you've never done meditation. How do you bring that whole mechanism into your life so that you can begin to use it?
Sure. I think it's helpful to think of mindfulness as being aware of the details of what we're experiencing. Mm-hmm. And if you start out to your surroundings, it might be aware of the people around you, the sounds you're hearing, the colors that you're looking at, the air against your face and hands. Is it moving or still? In the same way, we could be mindful to what's going on in our inner experience, our feelings, thoughts, and body reactions. And you can practice formal mindfulness, mindful meditation, which might involve sitting down for 5-10 minutes and focusing on your breath, noticing that your mind is going to take you in all different directions, and that's okay, and just gently returning them to your breathing. The idea is to begin to look at your feelings, thoughts, and even body reactions, just like you would the information around you, to observe. So, for example, I used to ask clients, what are you feeling? Mm-hmm. And now I sometimes will say, what feelings are you observing? What feelings are you noticing? I used to say, what are you thinking? If there was a pause in the session. Now I say, where did your mind take you?
Ooh, absolutely.
So it's beginning to observe where our mind is taking us and where our body is taking us in a sense.
This is interesting to me, Dr. Golden, because I remember for 2 years I've been was consulting from my home base here. And it was, I liked it. I didn't have to go on when it was bitter cold or something like that. But I started working with clients last year in the city. So now I get on a train, I go to Manhattan. And what's interesting is once I started getting back on the train after 2 years of not taking the train mostly every day, I found that it was really like an exciting experience. I would get to the train and notice all the people and they'd all look miserable. And I was like, wow, I was so in tune to everything going on around me. And I thought, wow, where did this come from? And it was because it was something new. And so tell me if I'm wrong here, but maybe sometimes it's good to kind of mix up your habits so that you get out of your normal state so you begin to notice things a little bit more.
I'm a firm believer in so-called pushing our envelope, and so whether you took flying lessons or take a train to Manhattan, I think adding novelty to our experiences, it creates resilience. Yeah. And the resilience to deal with change and novelty is very powerful dealing with our emotions as well, definitely.
Yeah.
Using that same experience on the train, I'm from New York originally, and I visited and I took the train, and I experienced in that one of the rides, just the mix of humanity in that car. And it was a moment where I experienced both a sense of, gee, we're all going about our business, doing the best we can. Isn't this nice?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting because when I was doing it every day for years, going to Manhattan, it didn't feel like anything. Even now, I kind of just, zone out, read a book and forget about everyone around me. But those 2 years of being away from that experience, when I went back to it, I was acutely aware of all the emotions and people around me. And it was exciting. And I think sometimes maybe to just step outside yourself and say, what's new about this experience? Let's just pay attention to it.
Very much. Notice the details of people, and even in a conversation, really listen to the person you're talking to. That would be mindful listening versus being in your head trying to think of the next sentence you're going to say on top of them or how to react to them. So mindful listening is another example of being mindful and in the present.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting. Many years ago, early in my 20s, I did some respite work with children with autism, and when they were in my care, I was very concerned about bringing them back in one piece. And because I didn't want my parents killing me here. And of course, I want the kid to come back and marvelous condition. But I found I was so worried being with them that they would be okay and our togetherness would be fine and they come back in one piece, that I was super acutely, highly aware of when we were out in the street together, making sure they didn't step into traffic. And I remember that life seemed so much more vibrant hanging out with these kids because I was, of course, worried about their safety, but it kept my emotions and all my sensory systems more alert than it would when I was just walking around by myself. And so I'm guessing we could just decide to do that for ourselves, as you said, just deciding to be mindful, pay attention to the surroundings around us, smell them, feel them, touch them, get in touch with all of our sensory systems.
That's key, is to be aware and to decide. Mm-hmm. One of the examples of mindfulness, I emphasize not just the formal mindfulness meditation, mm-hmm. but that a lot of mindfulness can be learned informally. So taking I call it an emotional pulse several times a day. What am I feeling right now? What did I feel a minute ago? Mm-hmm. Or a body check-in, just doing a scan for a minute from your head to toe. And you can feel, is my body relaxed or tense? And it is, the more you decide to do that, the more you can increase your mindfulness on a daily basis.
Yeah. It's an ever-going process. Don't be frustrated if you are yourself feeling anxious or angry and feeling like this will be a hard journey. Everything takes time to learn it, and you have wonderful courses out there to help people with that. Though you have a book, you have your website, angermanagementeducation.com, and tell them about your wonderful book, Overcoming Destructive Anger. Where can they get that?
Sure. It's available on Amazon or other websites that sell books, and also in bookstores.
So they can go to your website, and when you do workshops, can they sign up online? You do them several times a year. How does that usually work out?
I do them every month, and they're in person. I don't do them online.
Bummer.
I don't offer them online, unfortunately.
Maybe in the future. Well, you do have your wonderful book, which is a great resource for anyone who wants to get started in becoming more mindful and getting in touch. All their emotions, not just anger, and realizing that anger can be a wonderful tool. It doesn't have to be pushed away. And I just want to thank you, Dr. Golden, for coming to share your gifts today. Do you have any final words you'd like to leave with our audience?
I think it's important to remember that regardless of whatever habits you've had regarding anger, that you can learn new strategies and new habits. And like you say, it takes time, just like any other habits, whether you're learning to play an instrument, whether you're learning a certain area of study, it has to take patience and commitment.
Absolutely. But it's well worth it. You'll have a very fruitful life, and it won't be stressful, and you'll be in good health.
Right.
So thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Golden, for coming to share your great wisdom today on Savvy Business Radio.
And again, thank you for having me.
Savvy Business Radio broadcasts worldwide via a large podcast network, celebrating business owners, entrepreneurs, influencers, and successful individuals. Find out about our paid sponsorship opportunities or how to become a guest. Call 732-474-7375 or email Christina@savvybusinessradio.com.